Now let's get some expert insight into what zero waste looks like for restaurants and other private enterprises. Futurity CEO Jack Bobo joins me now in studio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So put into perspective for us, just how large of a problem is food waste globally?
Well, when you think about it, 1/3 of all the food produced on the planet is wasted. In the developing world, that usually comes before the consumer. In the developed world, often after the consumer. That's 1.3 billion tons around the world.
I mean, these are huge numbers, but a lot of people are wondering, why is this also an environmental problem and not just a waste problem?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, 15 to 20% of all greenhouse gases come from agriculture. Another 10 to 15% come from deforestation. 80% of which is caused by agriculture. So together, that's 25 to 30% of all the greenhouse gases in the world are coming from agriculture, and 10% of that is wasted.
So being that it certainly seems like it's a chain of things from agriculture to actually the restaurants themselves, what do restaurants then traditionally do with the waste now, since they're at the end of this process?
Well, historically, unfortunately, most restaurants have simply thrown it out in the trash. They're things that they haven't had a use for, and so it's just been easier to get rid of it than to try to figure out what to do with it.
And we know that a lot of that comes from concerns from regulators about health and safety, about safely disposing and managing food waste. How complicated is that to navigate, and are there any updates that we can look forward to?
Well, the good news is that the laws aren't as bad as many restaurants believe, and so a lot of it's just been information. So you have organizations like the National Restaurant Association that are trying to help restaurant owners understand and navigate those regulations so that they can stay on the right side of the law.
Now, we saw that some innovative and creative uses of sort of managing food waste and things on site. What are some of the creative trends that you're keeping an eye on in that space?
Well, so we have, on one hand, we have prevention. We want to make sure that the food never gets wasted. So you have all sorts of digital innovations that are about making sure that your inventory is correct. So you don't get food that you don't need, you get it just in time so that you're able to use what you have. The second part is about recovery, things that people would otherwise have, cut off the ends of your broccoli and thrown it away. We have companies like Teism, which are turning that into broccoli tots. And so now all of a sudden they turn it into a premium product, something that would have ended up in the waste bin.
Now, one of my local hot pot restaurants, it's an all-you-can-eat restaurant, and they have a policy on the wall that says anything that you don't eat will get weighed and you'll be charged accordingly. What role should consumers play in really cutting down on food waste and sort of the thinking that we have when we sit down to a meal?
Yeah, consumer behavior is an important part of this. Unfortunately, the food that's on your plate is often not the most expensive part of your dining experience. It's the labor that goes into it, and it's the real estate. And so restaurants often give you lots of food because consumers consider that good value. Unfortunately, if you eat more than you want or need, and so you're less healthy and you're less wealthy, that's not really good value. So part of it is changing the mindset of the consumer so that they acknowledge that getting the right size portion is not just, it is actually good value because it's making them happier and healthier.
So then how do you get more restaurants on board with this zero waste mindset?
Well, I think that restaurants that are trying to go to zero waste are definitely setting a trend. They're creating awareness of the challenge. And my guess is that many of the ideas and concepts that they have, well, they get transported into the broader food industry because, to be honest, we have to scale these kinds of innovations in order for them to really have an impact.
And so then in terms of the bottom line, because sometimes if it's not necessarily the environmental impact, it could be the bottom line that really motivates some of these companies and people to change. What do you think would motivate restaurants outside of sort of the do-good factor?
Well, I think if consumers understand that they're taking care of a problem that they care about, consumers will show up. If they are able to take things that were scraps and they were paying to have removed, and now they turn it not into a loss leader, but actually into a center of profit, then I think that there's a real opportunity there. And so really going into the rubbish bin and going to waste should be a last resort. And really for food scraps, there's no need for that to ever happen because you can always recycle.
So what do you see as the biggest challenges in sort of making that transition?
Well, it's infrastructure, because just because people want to do it, they don't know how to compost, they don't know where to do it. The infrastructure in many cities is not very well developed in order to do that. So there's a need for government also to help to promote the kind of infrastructure that will make it available, so that it's not one or two companies at a time, but entire cities can achieve it.
All right, well, certainly fascinating stuff. Lots of good advice there. Jack Bobo, Futurity CEO.